So much has happened over the last days and weeks. So much. There are times when this all feels like a dream, but then there's waking up. Waking up to the reality we were never expecting. We didn't expect an Easter like this. We didn't expect a life like this. What will the future be like now that everything has changed? The women, Mary Magdalene and the other Mary, who's maybe Jesus's mom, Mary, they wake up too. And the reality of death for them in the morning is as true as it was the night before. Jesus was really killed and his body taken down from the cross and really put in the tomb. And Mary Magdalene and Mary know that better than anyone. They were there for Jesus's last breath when the earth shook as if to echo the trauma they must have felt at watching their beloved one die. Matthew's gospel names Mary and Mary specifically. It tells us that after the others had left Jesus out of fear or despair, the women were there. They stayed with Jesus until they rolled a stone over the tomb. Now in the morning, after the Sabbath, the women come back. There's nothing more to be done for Jesus with the tomb sealed, but they come anyway, bearing witness to death, making space for their own grief. Perhaps imagining what life would be like if they could just rewind 1 week, just go back to when things were normal. But of course, normal wasn't that great. Jesus was alive, yes, but the focus and push of Jesus's ministry was waking us all up to the brokenness of the normal. Contrasting what is normal with what is the kingdom of God is what Jesus was all about. Because normal was sick or suffering people excluded from community by their disease or difference. Normal was prophets like John the Baptist being killed for their truth-telling. Normal was God's house being turned into an exploitative market. That's why Jesus spends his whole ministry healing, not only with miracles of curing and feeding, but also healing with teaching. The last shall be first. Blessed are the poor. And demonstrating a Palm Sunday parade and turning the tables in the temple. The whole point is for things to not go back to normal, isn't it? The death of Jesus underlines what Jesus had been trying to teach us this whole time. The world we've been living in always has been as scary and as unjust as it feels right now. It's just about all we can do sometimes to keep our heads down, to just keep on keeping on. Feed ourselves, go to work, get out of bed in the morning. That's what the women were doing too, Mary and Mary, when they headed to the tomb at dawn on the first day of the week. They were going about the daily business of grief and trauma when all of a sudden, just like at Jesus's death, their world again shakes, literally. An angel appears and rolls back the stone of the sealed tomb, and the guards who were standing there shook and became like the dead they were supposed to be guarding. The angel told the women the good news that Jesus had been raised. But when the angel said this, they started out by saying, "Do not be afraid." Angels often say this sort of thing when they appear. It might be because angels look scary, or because encounters with the holy shake us out of numbness. Or it might be that good news can be scary. We know how to deal with death. We've buried people before. We've buried hopes and dreams. We've forgotten relationships. But to hear that Christ has been raised, and to hear immediately that it is their job to communicate with the world about this, that the God of the universe chose Mary and Mary to be the first apostles, that is terrifying. What will resurrection mean for their lives? What does it look like to change gears from everything you thought you knew? So Mary and Mary left, and the gospel writer tells us that it was with fear and joy. I imagine those first steps sort of stumbling and then gradually picking up pace in this run, not sure whether running away from what just happened or towards what's next, this beautiful and holy, this resurrection freedom run that Mary and Mary are on. Because these women come from a long line of God's people on a terrifying and beautiful journey towards freedom. Just nights earlier, Mary and Mary had gathered with their whole community to remember the story of Exodus, of God liberating God's people from slavery in Egypt through the Red Sea. The story of that walk through the water to freedom was central to their and Jesus's understanding of who God is as Jewish people. It is the story that had sustained their ancestors during generations of Babylonian captivity. In fact, today's first reading that Cynthia read from Jeremiah, written to a people living in exile, references that same Exodus story. Jeremiah writes, "The people who survived the sword found grace in the wilderness." And now Jeremiah's people, the ones to whom the prophet is writing, they're on their own freedom journey, living in exile and yearning for things to be renewed. Over and over, the prophet Jeremiah uses the word again. Again, I will build you. Again, you shall take your tambourines and dance, like Miriam danced in the Red Sea. Again, you shall plant vineyards. God promises the people, the things that gave you life and joy, the signs of my love and faithfulness that you once knew are not gone forever, even if it might feel like it. There are times when this pandemic feels like exile, cut off from the sources of our life and joy. I can relate to Jeremiah's people. I too long to take tambourines and shakers and sing with you. Your singing voices are one of the things I miss most. When I edit these worship videos together, I'm sort of sitting there at my computer alternating between weeping and laughing for the joy of seeing and hearing you and the sorrow of not being together. Today, the prophet Jeremiah reminds us that what God has done for people in the past, God will do for us again. We can trust God to keep God's promises because God's love, faithfulness, steadfast love, loving kindness, those things have always been the center of our relationship, the basis of our relationship with God from the very beginning. Matthew's whole gospel started by reminding us of that ongoing relationship with God through the generations. Matthew starts his gospel story about Jesus' life with a genealogy. He sort of name drops faithful people throughout the ages who have known God's love and faithfulness. Matthew traces from Abraham to David, and David to the Babylonian deportation, the setting for Jeremiah's people. And from that captivity to the Messiah, centuries of God's journeying with the people in love to freedom. And if we know anything from these stories, it's that the journey to freedom doesn't look like going backwards to how things used to be. The journey is ahead into the unknown. That's why we need angels to remind us to not be afraid. On that Easter morning, Mary and Mary ran in fear and joy. They were running their freedom run, their resurrection run, sent by an angel to proclaim that Jesus was alive to the rest of the disciples. And smack dab in the middle of it all, on their way to do their apostolic work, suddenly Jesus meets them. The risen Jesus, the one they were on their way to tell about, interrupts them with greetings. And now they're running to Christ and down to the ground in worship. Resurrection is like that. Resurrection isn't for the times when things are going according to plan. Resurrection isn't just for people who feel like smiling. Resurrection isn't even for people who are ready. Resurrection is for the times when we wake up and wonder what life will be like now that everything has changed. Resurrection is for when we manage to pull ourselves out of bed but aren't sure how we'll manage to do much more than the bare minimum of surviving today. Resurrection is for those of us who are afraid and who need reminders to have courage. Resurrection shows up right in the middle of all our running around, running from and running to. Resurrection is an interruption, a surprise. Resurrection comes to us, knocks us off our feet. Resurrection isn't for someone else, some other version of life where things are going better. Resurrection is for you, for us, for now. We are all on a freedom run with those faithful women. God is bringing us all terrified into our future where we are more alive, more free. Again, you will build plans for the future. Again, you will sing and dance and play. Again, you will enjoy the food of each other's company. But it won't be going backwards to how things were, because this freedom journey will change us. Christ is risen, and nothing will ever be the same again.